violence, lies, the end of friendship. What you're about to see isn't just another storyline. This is when a man's hunger became so wild, so angry, so completely out of control that he broke everything he once cared about. And when it was over, Paul Heyman, the smartest man in wrestling, was staring at a monster he helped build. Before we start, I need you to do something. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever watched someone you trusted turn their back on you, then you know what happened that Monday night. Hit that subscribe button right now. What we're talking about today isn't just wrestling. It's about loyalty, dreams, and what happens when we choose power over family. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll want to be part of this talk. Turn on that notification bell because moments like this don't happen every day. This is SLAMZONE, and we're breaking down the most vicious attack that left the WWE Universe in total shock. October 13, 2025. Perth, Australia. Monday Night Raw. The crowd was pumped, but nobody knew what was coming. Seth Rollins stood in that ring like a champion. He just did the impossible. He beat Cody Rhodes at Crown Jewel. The same Cody Rhodes who had beaten him 3 times before. The same guy who looked untouchable with that championship belt. But Rollins finally won, and he took home the Crown Jewel Championship. The visionary was on top of the world. He had every reason to celebrate. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed stood next to him. Paul Heyman was by his side. This was the Vision, the most dangerous group on Monday Night Raw. They looked like they couldn't be stopped. They looked united. They looked like they could take over everything. Rollins grabbed that microphone with total confidence. He thanked Breakker. He praised Bronson Reed. He talked about how smart Paul Heyman was. But then he said something that changed everything. He said he didn't need anyone to reach his goals. He said he could do this alone. You could feel it. That change in the air. That moment when words hurt more than any weapon. Breakker's eyes. Did you see them? That look wasn't just anger. It was rage. It was hunger. It was the look of someone who had been held back for way too long. The show went on. Matches happened. The crowd cheered and booed. Everything looked normal. But underneath it all, something was building. Something dark. Something violent. And Paul Heyman, the man who had seen countless betrayals in his long career, had no idea he was about to see the worst one yet. The final part of the show came. Rollins was back in the ring. He was still happy about his win. Still confident. Still thinking he had everything under control. The music hit. Bron Breakker's music. The crowd exploded because they thought Breakker was coming to celebrate with his leader. They thought this was going to be another good moment. But when Breakker walked out, something was different. His walk. His body language. His eyes. This wasn't the same guy who stood next to Rollins earlier. This was a man on a mission. This was a man who had made a choice. And that choice was about to shake the entire wrestling world. Rollins held out his hand. He smiled. He thought everything was okay. He thought his words earlier were just confidence. He had no idea he was standing in the ring with someone who was about to explode. Breakker looked at that hand. He looked at Rollins' face. And then it happened. The spear. Not just any spear. This was a spear that came from pure anger. Breakker flew like a train with no brakes. The impact was horrible. You could hear it through the TV. Rollins' body folded in half. The air left his body. The Crown Jewel Championship flew away. And the whole arena went silent for a second before going crazy. But Breakker wasn't done. No way. This wasn't about sending a message. This was about destruction. This was about making a statement so loud that every person in that locker room would hear it. He pulled Rollins up. Another spear. The ring shook. Rollins' body crumbled. And still, Breakker wanted more. The crowd didn't know how to react. Some cheered because they love chaos. Some were shocked because they couldn't believe what they were seeing. But everyone was standing. Everyone was watching history happen. Bronson Reed ran into the ring. But he wasn't there to stop Breakker. He was there to help him. The two men who had been called the Bronsons, the most powerful duo on Raw, were now attacking the man they once called their leader. Reed's huge body stood over Rollins as he hit him again and again. Breakker moved like a shark that smelled blood. And then Paul Heyman made his choice. The wise man. The genius. The man who had stood next to Roman Reigns for years. The man who had helped CM Punk. The man who knew more about loyalty and betrayal than anyone else. He walked into that ring and raised the arms of Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed. This wasn't just a betrayal of Seth Rollins. This was Paul Heyman betting everything on 2 younger, hungrier, more violent superstars. He looked down at Rollins, broken in the middle of the ring, and he made his choice. The Vision was dead. And something far more dangerous was born. Breakker grabbed the microphone. His voice was full of intensity. He wasn't nervous. He told the world that he had worked hard for 4 years. 4 years of grinding. 4 years of waiting for his moment. And he was the hungriest man in that locker room. This was his time. This was his chance to become the face of WWE. The words hit hard. Because you could feel the truth. You could see the fire in his eyes. This wasn't fake. This was a man starting a war against everyone who stood between him and greatness. The crowd in Perth was going insane. Some were chanting Breakker's name. Others were screaming at him. But everyone was reacting. Because that's what great wrestling does. It makes you feel something. And what happened that night made everyone feel everything. Rollins lay in the ring, holding his ribs. The man who had just celebrated his biggest win was now living his worst moment. Not in a match, but in trust, in loyalty, in friendship. Heyman stood tall with his new guys. The vision that Rollins had built was now Heyman's vision, and Rollins had nothing left. Before we go further, I need to pause for a second. If you're feeling this story, if your heart is racing right now, then you need to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves wrestling like you do. Subscribe to SLAMZONE and join the family. We break down every intense moment, every shocking twist, every bit of drama that makes wrestling the greatest show on earth. Now let's get back to the story. What happened after was just as brutal. Rollins had to be helped to the back. Doctors surrounded him. He could barely walk. The spears had done real damage, but the emotional pain was even worse. The man who had trusted Breakker and Reed, who had brought them into his group, who had given them chances, was now their biggest victim. Social media went crazy. Twitter blew up. Instagram was filled with reaction videos. Wrestling fans everywhere couldn't believe what they just saw, because this wasn't just another bad guy turn. This was planned. This was Bron Breakker telling the entire roster that he wasn't waiting anymore. He was taking what he thought was his. And Paul Heyman, the man who planned this whole betrayal? He was in his element. This is what he does. This is what he's always done. He finds the next big thing and rides it to the top. He saw something in Breakker that night. He saw a future champion. He saw someone who could carry WWE for the next 10 years. And he made his move. The weeks after were just as crazy. CM Punk came in as the #1 challenger for Rollins' World Heavyweight Championship. The Vision, now led by Breakker with Heyman as the mastermind, started their attack on Monday Night Raw. They attacked everyone in their way. They made it clear this wasn't about revenge. This was about power. Logan Paul came back and became a target. The Maverick tried to ask for his own title shot, but Breakker and Reed had other plans. They beat him down along with CM Punk in a brutal attack that left both men hurt. Heyman planned it all perfectly. Every move calculated. Every attack designed to send a message. But through it all, you have to understand what was driving Bron Breakker. This wasn't just about titles or fame or money. This was about a young man who grew up in the shadow of legends. His father, Rick Steiner. His uncle, Scott Steiner. The legendary Steiner brothers who ruled tag team wrestling for decades. Breakker had that history hanging over him from day one. He tore through NXT like a hurricane. Two-time NXT champion, NXT tag team champion, Intercontinental champion on the main roster. But that wasn't enough. Because in his mind, he should have already been at the top. He should have already been main eventing WrestleMania. He should have already been carrying WWE. And when Rollins said those words, when he said he didn't need anyone, something broke inside Breakker. Because in that moment, he realized he was being held back. He was being used. As backup. As someone else's helper. And Bron Breakker refuses to be anyone's helper. The look in his eyes that night told the whole story. This was a man who had been patient for too long. This was a man who had played by the rules and waited his turn. And where did it get him? Standing in someone else's shadow. Being praised but never pushed to the top. Being told he was the future while watching others live in the now. So he took control. He hit those spears with 4 years of anger behind them. He stood over Rollins knowing he had just changed his whole career. And he joined Paul Heyman because he understood that Heyman could give him what Rollins never would. A spotlight. A platform. And most importantly, respect. Paul Heyman saw exactly what he needed. He saw hunger. He saw rage. He saw talent ready to explode. Heyman has managed some of the greatest wrestlers ever. Brock Lesnar. CM Punk. Roman Reigns. And now Bron Breakker. Because Heyman doesn't waste time with average talent. He only works with stars. And in Breakker, he saw the brightest star of this generation. The pain of that betrayal can't be overstated. Rollins had opened his group to Breakker. He had given him opportunities. He had trusted him. And that trust was paid back with violence. With betrayal. With a spear that not only ended the vision but also ended any friendship between these men. This is where legends are made. Not in the wins. Not in the championships. But in these moments of pure emotion. When a man decides that enough is enough. When someone takes control of their own future no matter what. Bron Breakker became a legend that night in Perth. Not because he won a match. But because he declared war on everything holding him back. And Paul Heyman? He stood in the middle of that chaos with a smile. Because he knows chaos creates opportunity. He knows that from the ruins of the vision, he could build an empire. An empire with Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed as his destroyers. An empire that would rule Raw and eventually SmackDown. An empire that would force WWE to rebuild around them. But here's where it gets even better. Rollins wasn't just going to disappear. The visionary is a fighter. He's been counted out before and he's always come back stronger. So now you have this amazing story. Rollins wanting revenge. Breakker rising to the main event. CM Punk lurking as the new World Heavyweight Champion. And Heyman pulling all the strings. What's coming is filled with violence. War Games is coming. Survivor Series is on the way. And you can bet that Bron Breakker is going to be right in the middle of it all. Because he's not just a Paul Heyman guy now, he's the Paul Heyman guy, the chosen one, the future. The man who is going to define this time in WWE whether anyone likes it or not. What happened that October night in Perth was more than just a heel turn, it was a statement. Bron Breakker told the whole world that he's done playing by anyone else's rules, he's done waiting for permission, he's done being patient, and he's done standing in anyone's shadow. The power of those spears, the coldness in his eyes, the strength in his voice, everything about that moment screamed main event star, everything about that attack said future world champion. Everything about that betrayal said this is my time. And Paul Heyman, the man who has been through everything, found himself in power again, not as someone's advisor, but as the builder of a new era. An era built on youth, hunger, and an uncontrollable desire to win. This is what wrestling is all about. These moments that make your heart race. These betrayals that leave you speechless. These statements that force you to pay attention. Bron Breakker didn't just turn on Seth Rollins. He turned the entire WWE universe upside down. So where do we go from here? Breakker is now one of the most dangerous men in WWE. Heyman has his new project. Rollins wants revenge. And Monday Night Raw has been changed forever. The title scene is more chaotic than ever. Teams are forming and breaking every week. And at the center is a 28-year-old powerhouse who decided that October 13th was the night he would take over. This is the kind of storytelling that makes wrestling special. When you look at a moment and know that nothing will be the same. When you watch an attack and feel it in your chest. When you see the look in someone's eyes and know they've crossed a line they can never come back from. Bron Breakker crossed that line, and he did it with Paul Heyman's blessing. The wise man wasn't broken that night, he was empowered, because he found exactly what he was looking for. A superstar who would do anything to reach the top. A destroyer who would leave destruction in his path. A future that he could shape into the next great WWE legend. The spear that ended the vision was just the start, because now Breakker has his sights on every championship, every main event, and every moment of glory. And with Paul Heyman guiding him, with Bronson Reed backing him up, and with that endless hunger driving him, there might not be anyone who can stop him. This is the story of a man who refused to wait, who refused to be told when his time would come, who took his future into his own hands. Bron Breakker is here. Bron Breakker is hungry. And Bron Breakker is coming for everything. If this breakdown opened your eyes or made you see this moment differently, do me a favor right now. Smash that like button. Share this video with every wrestling fan you know. Subscribe to SLAMZONE because we're going to cover every twist and turn of this story. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Was Breakker right to betray Rollins? Is Paul Heyman making the right choice? And most importantly, who can stop the vision now that it's been rebuilt in Bron Breakker's image? This is SLAMZONE, where we break down the moments that matter. Where we dive deep into the stories that make wrestling the most exciting show on the planet. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a breakdown. Because if this moment taught us anything, it's that in WWE, everything can change in a second. And when it does, you're going to want to be right here with us, breaking it all down, feeling every emotion, and understanding every part of this beautiful, brutal, chaotic world of wrestling. The spear heard around the world. The betrayal that shook WWE. The moment Bron Breakker became a star and Paul Heyman found his next great project. This is the story. This is the moment. This is SLAMZONE.